Okay, this is now the 5 Minute Tower for the 13th of April 2017, and it's a follow up to or based on a comment from somebody from a couple of days ago, because on the 11th of April, the video was about there being four definite times of day that we can recognize. Sunrise is clear, noon, sunset, and midnight. And we've got four times of day, each of which has its own characteristics, we can say, or typical behavior at that time of day. And we've also got four court cards, king, queen, knight, and page. And I wondered about making a connection between one of the four court cards and one of the four times of day. And I gave the example of the knight at sunrise, the king at noon, the queen at sunset, and the page at midnight. And Stephanie left a comment because she had a different sequence. So she started with the page. For her, the page made more sense at sunrise. And she made good points. And it's a bit like the page at sunrise and the king at midnight. It's like Stephanie's version of the story, let's say, or Stephanie's version of the correlation. And the thing is, I maybe don't agree with it completely, but the point is she at least has her own version, and that's better. Having a version of your own is better from the point of view of reading cards, so that you can make something of them. Because sometimes people turn a card, and I've heard this off and on over the years, people will turn a card and their mind goes blank and they don't know what to say, or maybe they've got to look up a book and they don't want to look up the book because it makes them look unprofessional with a questioner, let's say. So I think part of the solution to having a blank mind or not knowing what to say is that you have questions for yourself about questions about cards and what they show, and you spend some time wondering about what a card means or what it might mean or how it might answer a particular question that somebody asks. So this exercise of relating sunrise, noon, sunset, and midnight to the one of the four king, queen, knight, and page is going to help you kind of unearth or uncover your own understanding. Because I'm thinking that you already have ideas, but you maybe haven't connected with them, or you haven't uncovered them, or you haven't accessed them. So you've got ideas, because it's not so much what does a card mean, but it's more what's going on with it, with this particular card, or what's going on, what type of behavior, activity, condition is the person dealing with when a particular card comes up. So Stephanie talked about the king being or corresponding to or being the midnight position, because she saw the king as protecting us and watching over us while we sleep, which is quite good. I like it. And I can see why she's saying what she says, and it does make sense that the king would be somebody, it's dark, it's nighttime, but we can sleep soundly because we know that we're protected. And that can be what the king does. He protects. So depending on the question that comes up, it can be that the king will be somebody who's going to protect you or protect the questioner. Or maybe the questioner has to act in the role of looking after other people or looking out for the interests of other people. And that's what the king of whatever the suit is can represent. But I was thinking about midnight, and if you've ever seen the TV show 24 with Jack Bauer, I've mentioned Jack before, but there's a bit in it because the TV show takes place, and it's supposed to be taking place in real time, and they always get to the point where the following takes place between 12 p.m. and 1 p.m. And I don't know, I used to think, okay, why don't they just say between noon and or like noon and 1 p.m. or midnight and 1 a.m. because they always talked about 12 p.m. And I thought, that's confusing. Does 12 p.m. mean the beginning of the afternoon, or does it mean the middle of the night. And so 12 a.m. and 12 p.m. I find confusing. Midnight, I know what it means. Noon, I know what it means. So anyway, back to midnight. So we're thinking about midnight. Is it the beginning or the end? So are we thinking that midnight represents the end of the process that began the previous day or the previous midnight? Or does it represent like 1 second after midnight is the beginning of a whole new 24-hour period? Because I tend to think of midnight as being not so much the end of the previous day, but the beginning of a new day. So I'm thinking of 1 second after midnight as opposed to 1 second before midnight. Although Stephanie may be thinking it's the end of the day. So it can get us thinking about, is midnight an ending or a beginning? So if the king if midnight is the end of the day, and it could be, but somehow if it's the end of the process and it's the fulfillment of the process, if it's the king, I would expect that with the king you're also getting credit, right? You're getting credit for what you've done or what you've achieved, or the fact you've achieved something, or you're getting recognition that you've done a good job, let's say. But I can't see the connection. Well, I have a problem because it's dark at midnight. You can't see. Unless you've got a light, of course, but generally on its own, you can't see. So I find it difficult to make a connection between getting credit, which seems to me to belong with what the king represents, and midnight when it's dark. And that, I think, is partly why I like the king at midday. It's noon, the sun's directly overhead. It's bright, it's sunny, it's powerful, it's warm, it's hot. And that, I think, for me, goes more with the king and what the king would represent. Whereas at midnight it's dark, right? So it can be a time of mystery. And because it's dark, things can be unclear. And that seems to me more like what the page would represent, because with the page, it's a bit like we don't know how the page, he or she, is going to turn out. There's a certain amount of mystery involved with the page because it's new, it's at the beginning, it's young, it's youthful, it's inexperienced, and we don't know how they're going to react, because somebody can have a problem and it makes them stronger. Another person gives the same problem and it just overwhelms them. So I think, in a way, with my thinking, with the page, we don't know yet how ideally the page will turn into the king or a strong individual, but we don't know how it's actually going to work out in practice, because the page could be, we just don't know. So there's a certain amount of mystery or uncertainty or lack of clarity about the final outcome with a page. But at the same time, if we take the idea of midnight as a new beginning, maybe it made me think, maybe it's a bit like the idea that the acorn contains a complete tree, only it hasn't happened yet. An acorn will turn into an oak tree given the right conditions, right? You plant it, it grows roots and develops into an oak tree. So in a way, the complete oak tree with all its size is contained within this tiny acorn. So it's a bit like the end or the culmination or the fulfillment of the acorn, the tree, is already contained in the acorn. So I prefer the page as the unformed young acorn, whereas Stephanie can be right where she thinks of the beginning point of midnight is already contained, the outcome is already contained in the beginning, because we know that an acorn's not going to turn into an apple tree, or it's not going to turn into a rhododendron bush, because it's an acorn. So we can see that the king in its own way can represent the beginning as well as the end. But at the same time, this idea of the starting point already containing the final outcome. I can see how that applies to midnight and to a page and maybe to a king, but it doesn't apply to most other cards. I don't see that you're going. I don't think you're going to see or think about the beginning and the final outcome when you look at the Three of Swords, for example, or most other cards. This idea of the beginning point already containing the final outcome doesn't belong with every card. So what we're doing with this exercise is it's not so much that we have answers or so that we can have answers, but it's more like how so that we can practice making connections between ideas and the card so that we can come up with answers to the question that has been asked. And so that when we turn a card, we don't have a blank mind, an empty mind, or if we do have a blank mind, we're going to be able, we know what to do, we're going to be able to come up with information. Okay, I don't want to go on for too long, so I'm going to stop now. That's it for the moment. Thank you very much. Okay, bye-bye.